Groove is the sense of propulsive rhythmic feel, or sense of swing created by the interaction of the music played by a band's rhythm section. Ubiquitous in popular music, groove is a consideration in genres such as salsa, funk, rock, fusion, and soul. The word is often used to describe the aspect of certain music that makes one want to move, dance, or groove. Musicologists and other scholars began to analyze the concept of groove in the 1990s. They have argued that a groove is an understanding of rhythmic patterning, or feel, and an intuitive sense of a cycle in motion that emerges from carefully aligned concurrent rhythmic patterns that sets in motion dancing or foot tapping on the part of listeners. The term groove was taken from the groove of a vinyl record, meaning the track cut in the lathe that makes a record. Description: musicians' perspectives. Like the term swing, which is used to describe a cohesive rhythmic feel in a jazz context, the concept of groove can be hard to define. Indeed, some dictionaries use the terms as synonyms: groovy, denotes music that really swings. Mark Sabatella's article establishing the groove argues that groove is a completely subjective thing. He claims that one person may think a given drummer has a great feel, while another person may think the same drummer sounds too stiff, and another may think he is too loose. Similarly, a bass educator states that while groove is an elusive thing, it can be defined as what makes the music breathe, and the sense of motion in the context of a song. In a musical context, general dictionaries define a groove as a pronounced, enjoyable rhythm, or the act of creating, dank, into, or enjoying rhythmic music. Steve Van Teletuis explains the groove as the point in this sense when he defines it as a point in a song or performance when even the people who can't dance wanna feel like dancing. Due to the effect of the music. Bernard Coquelet argues that the groove is the way an experienced musician will play a rhythm compared with the way it is written by playing slightly before or after the beat. Coquelet claims that the notion of groove actually has to do with aesthetics and style. Groove is an artistic element, that is to say human. And it will evolve depending on the harmonic context, the place in the song, the sound of the musician's instrument, and, in interaction with the groove of the other musicians, which he calls collective groove. Minute rhythmic variations by the rhythm section members such as the bass player can dramatically change the feel as a band plays a song, even for a simple singer-songwriter groove. Theoretical analysis. UK musicologist Richard Middleton notes that while the concept of groove has long been familiar in musicians' own usage, musicologists and theorists have only more recently begun to analyze this concept. Middleton states that a groove marks an understanding of rhythmic patterning that underlies its role in producing the characteristic rhythmic feel of a piece. He notes that the feel created by a repeating framework is also modified with variations. Groove, in terms of pattern sequencing, is also known as shuffle note to euro, where there is deviation from exact step positions. When the musical slang phrase being in the groove is applied to a group of improvisers, this has been called an advanced level of development for any improvisational music group, which is equivalent to Bochman-Jaworski's descriptions of an evoked field, which systems dynamics scholars claim are forces of unseen connection that directly influence our experience and behavior. Peter Forrester and John Bailey argue that the chances of achieving this higher level of playing is improved when the musicians are open to others' musical ideas, complement, other participant to Euro unregistered trademark sick musical ideas, and taking risks with the music. Tari and Agen Seitfeld's definition of groove is an intuitive sense of style as process, a perception of a cycle in motion, a form or organizing pattern being revealed, a recurrent clustering of elements through time. Agen states that, when a groove is established among players, the musical whole becomes greater than the sum of its parts, enabling a person, a Euro to experience something beyond himself which he/she cannot create alone. Jeff Pressing's 2002 article claimed that a groove or feel is a cognitive temporal phenomenon emerging from one or more carefully aligned concurrent rhythmic patterns, characterized by perception of recurring pulses, and subdivision of structure in such pulses. Perception of a cycle of time, of length 2 or more pulses, enabling identification of cycle locations, and effectiveness of engaging synchronizing body responses. Neuroscientific Perspectives, the groove has been cited as an example of sensory-motor coupling between neural systems. Sensory-motor coupling is the coupling or integration of the sensory system and motor system. Sensory-motor integration is not a static process. For a given stimulus, there is no one single motor command. Neural responses at almost every stage of a sensory-motor pathway are modified at short and long time scales by biophysical and synaptic processes, recurrent and feedback connections, and learning, as well as many other internal and external variables. Used in different genres, R&B, the groove is also associated with funk performers, such as James Brown's drummers Clyde Stubblefield and J-Bo Starks, and with soul music. In the 1950s, when funk and funky were used increasingly as adjectives in the context of soul music, the meaning being transformed from the original one of a pungent odor to a redefined meaning of a strong, distinctive groove. As soul dance music of its day, the basic idea of funk was to create as intense a groove as possible. When a drummer plays a groove that is very solid and with a great feel, this is referred to informally as being in the pocket. When a drummer maintains this feel for an extended period of time, never wavering, this is often referred to as a deep pocket. Hip-hop, a concept similar to groove, or swing, is also used in other African American genres such as hip-hop. The rhythmic groove that jazz artists call a sense of a swing is sometimes referred to as having flow in the hip-hop scene. Flow is as elemental to hip-hop as the concept of swing is to jazz. Just as the jazz concept of swing involves performers deliberately playing behind or ahead of the beat, the hip-hop concept of flow is about funking with one's expectations of time that is, the rhythm and pulse of the music. Flow is not about what is being said so much as how one is saying it. Jazz. In some more traditional styles of jazz, the musicians often use the word swing to describe the sense of rhythmic cohesion of a skilled group. However, since the 1950s, musicians from the organ trio and Latin jazz subgenres have also used the term groove. Jazz flute player Herbie Mann talks a lot about the groove. In the 1950s, Mann locked into a Brazilian groove in the early 60s, then moved into a funky, soulful groove in the late 60s and early 70s. By the mid-70s he was making hit disco records, still cooking in a rhythmic groove. He describes his approach to finding the groove as follows: all you have to do is find the waves that are comfortable to float on top of. Mann argues that the epitome of a groove record is Memphis Underground or Push Push, because the rhythm section is locked all in one perception. Reggae. In Jamaican reggae, dancehall, and dub music, the Creole term rhythm is used to describe the rhythm patterns created by the drum pattern or a prominent bass line. In other musical contexts a rhythm would be called a groove, or beat. One of the widely copied rhythms, Real Rock, was recorded in 1967 by Sound Dimension. It was built around a single, emphatic bass note followed by a rapid succession of lighter notes. The pattern repeated over and over hypnotically. The sound was so powerful that it gave birth to an entire style of reggae meant for slow dancing called rubber dub. Groove metal. Influenced by the sound of Bad Brains, in the 1990s the term groove was also used to describe elements of a form of thrash metal called groove metal, which is based around the use of mid-tempo thrash riffs and detuned power chords played with heavy syncopation. Speed wasn't a unregistered trademark to the main point anymore, it was what Pantera singer Phil Anselmo called the power groove. Riffs became unusually heavy without the need of growling or the extremely distorted guitars of death metal, rhythms depended more on a heavy groove. Groove metal drums typically use double bass drumming, with emphasis on using the double bass drum in waves, rather than rapid-fire double bass and blast beats used in extreme metal styles. Uncommon time signatures and polyrhythms are typical for some bands, and generally these bands put heavy emphasis on the changing beat. With heavy metal the term groove can also be associated with stoner metal, sludge metal, doom metal and death metal genres as well as gent. See also, ostinato, rare groove, sensory motor coupling, groove, tempo rubato, references. Further reading, Bus, WG toward objective measurement and evaluation of jazz piano performance via duct MIDI-based groove quantized templates. Music Perception 19, 443-461. Clark, Mike, and Paul Jackson Rhythm Combination, Realization Sets Svakada. Video Recording, 1 cassette. Video Workshop Series. NP. Atlas. Klingmorn, Heinrich, Improvising with a Groove, Pedagogic Steps Towards an Elusive Task, Lecture at the 2nd IASJ Jazz Education Conference, Corfu 2010, Pressing, Jeff, Black Atlantic Rhythm. Its Computational and Transcultural Foundations. Music Perception 19, 285-310. Paragraph Glare, J.A. Searching for Swing. Participatory Discrepancies in the Jazz Rhythm Section. Ethnomusicology 39, 21-54. Pop Scriptum, The Groove Issue, List of Literature on Groove, 4.